Just in case you're not convinced that we have a problem in the modern world, here's a chart of a study that was done in 2010 comparing the 15-year survival rate of 45-year-old women in this case, in this particular chart, although they looked at men and women, comparing the 15-year survival rate of 45-year-olds, which means if you're 45, what is the likelihood that you're going to make it to 60? And then the cost of providing that care of the system. And so in this case, you can see in 1995 and in 2005, the difference between our country and the United States. In both cases, the U.S. is at the end of the scale. We're at the bottom of the scale of these developed countries in terms of the survival percentage. But we also spend more money. Now, back in 1975, we weren't really that far out of the ballpark, but as you can see since then, we spend almost twice as much money as Japan and Australia, who are really several points ahead of us, and the UK, who's several points ahead of us. And, this is really not a study to really make any political point or to make any overarching point other than the study itself concludes that none of the reasons, none of the excuses that the U.S. healthcare system to blame the individual for key risk factors, none of those excuses of blaming the individual actually hold water, because this study actually takes that into account. So things like smoking and obesity, traffic accidents and homicides, it takes those into account comparatively from country to country, and none of them really explain the increasing gap in the relative performance of the U.S. healthcare system. And so I say that to say that there is obviously there's an individual issue, and we all have our choices to make, but there's also a systemic issue that, the writer of the Wall Street Journal article that published that was commenting on this study said that the observation that Americans are spending relatively more on health but living relatively shorter, less healthy lives has led some critics to allege that the U.S. healthcare system is uniquely inefficient. And so what do we propose that's different? What we propose is that currently, we don't know what we don't know. And what we mean by that is that when we acknowledge that we really don't understand holistic prevention, we really don't understand that we're in our healthcare system, that we are spirit, soul, which is your mind, emotions, and will, and body, and that each of these has an impact on the others. So a simple example of this is that stress is the cause of 85 to 90% of all disease, and yet we mostly misunderstand what the term stress means in our lives, and we're even less equipped to know what to do with it. Another example is that real food as in not processed and packaged, is healing. And yet we have an entire healthcare system with highly trained providers who have near zero training in food. What we often call nutrition or dietetics in conventional healthcare is really more about chemical makeup of food that's been translated into pharmaceutical uses of what are called vitamins. And these things are not really food, they're mostly chemicals. So knowledge is vital. And some of this, a lot of this actually, is what our great-grandmothers knew because their mothers taught them. And in a modern society, we've really lost in the last few generations most of this knowledge because we grew up in the advertising age, where knowledge came from Kellogg's and Campbell's soup and Camel cigarettes rather than our grandmother. And we really don't know how deeply embedded these biases can be, but they really do drive a lot of our thinking. But however, more than knowledge is needed to solve this adaptive problem, because the second side of the equation is that we don't see what we don't see. You see, if this was just a technical problem and we simply received a fix, we could be on our way. But how often have you learned something about your health that made a lot of sense to you at the time, only to dismiss it, an hour later as, well, of course I'd be healthy if I did that, but who does that? Who could live like that? That's a prime example of an adaptive problem. It's the knowledge that you have, but you have a difficult time translating it into moment-by-moment decision-making. So resolving that requires understanding of the thinking behind your choices, and it requires the development of the skills to find that best thinking moment by moment. And many people call this particular circle, this particular side of the equation, health coaching or wellness coaching. And I talk about it differently for 3 reasons. The first is that so many coaches are poorly trained, or they lack any training at all with working with people. I'm really shocked that people can be certified as coaches after just a weekend seminar. They can be certified as coaches with just a few hours of training, or even an online webinar that's not even interactive, where they're working with people, where they're just learning things. And so many coaches really lack training. So I don't like using the word coaching for that reason. I also don't like using it because coaching is used without meaning throughout our society. We talk about coaching all sorts of sports teams. And some coaches, of course, are better than others. We talk about coaching people in how to style their hair. We talk about coaching people in how to eat. And often, what happens is, and this is the third reason, that coaching becomes an accountability partner, or a step-by-step instruction from an expert. And so we're not eliciting best thinking, we're actually giving you step-by-step how to accomplish something. And what happens with that is, the minute you walk out the door after experiencing that, you will often forget the steps that you were told that would work if only you would do them. And so coaching in its purest form should leave you full of all of your own thoughts for your next steps. Okay, so your own thoughts for your next steps, not someone else's, not what would work if you could do it, but leave you full of a vision for what works for you. So with those 2 things in mind, what I want to talk about a little bit is holistic prevention knowledge, and then what this conversation looks like, and then some of the things that that you can do to connect with that as we move into 2013.